getting to the psychological stress part, you have looked a lot at various types of psychological stressors, and those seem to be, as you mentioned, biomarked by a shorter telomere. Mm-hmm. But you've also looked at a variety of other types of stress, which seem to be positive, more healthy, and that seems to sort of buffer some of those negative effects to some degree. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Just to be really simplistic, when we think about stress, I know it has a bad rap, but that's because it's toxic stress that is causing dysregulated health and depression. And that means something really big. Not necessarily what we're all suffering from, that neurotic feeling of stress and time pressure, but rather being having traumatic things happen to you, particularly as a child, sets you up to feel threat responses much more in your brain and your body. So there's that kind of programming that happens in childhood. And then there's like the chronic stresses that we have as adults, which are things like caregiving or job stress or domestic violence in relationships. So things that go on for years and years. So those are the types of things when we do see telomere shortening and inflammation. And all the rest, like work stress, is not related to telomere shortness.
Oh, really?
Burnout is when you're really, it's gone on long enough that you've gotten this kind of profile of demoralization from it. But not the typical adrenaline type stress that we deal with a lot. I mean, it's not good for us, but I'm just saying that's not going to show up as much or more inconsistently. In our
what about
telomeres.
rumination, when you're like constantly thinking about something that's
So
negative?
I would say that rumination is part of chronic stress. That is when things happen and we carry it with us moment to moment, day to day, where we keep ourselves in a stress state. So that's one of our targets in our interventions. We really like to look at rumination. That's why meditation is so interesting, because it really targets. You can't be present and be ruminating at the same time.
So you think that, because oftentimes, with something high stress, if I'm working on a project, definitely work related, I do tend to ruminate. But it's not like I'm ruminating on it for years. So that you think there is a difference between that sort of short-term rumination where you're distracted by whatever projects you have to go and you're not present as much, versus like a very traumatic type of stress that's like like financial stress or something.
I think that it's easy for us to study the big events and the chronic events, to see that showing up in our data on accelerated aging. What you're talking about is much harder to measure and study, but I absolutely do think it matters. And we are looking at daily stress in our current studies and seeing that people who have this profile of more elevated, we call it perseverative cognition or perseverative thought processes, they have accelerated biomarkers of aging, telomere length, and inflammation.
What is that?
What is that? So you wake up and you're already worrying about the day, feeling like you can't control it, feeling anxious. So there's a wake up response. Because what is waking up? It should be clean slate, but it's not, because we have these different tendencies to maybe jump ahead already in the future, right? So worrying, planning, anticipating. We find that our caregivers do that a lot more. They wake up, they're already in a stress state. Their cortisol is higher.
That's what I was going to ask. Are there any other type of markers?
And if they're, whereas some caregivers wake up and they feel positive, they're looking forward to the day, they feel joy, they look better in their telomerase enzyme and their cortisol. So waking up states are really important to notice.
So like a pessimistic view versus optimistic view, is that?
So that's absolutely related, and that's kind of the bigger, personality thing you take with you and you see the world in that way. So if you're high in pessimism, you just expect bad things to happen. Pessimism is related to shorter telomeres. We have that scale on our website because I think it's so important for people to know their style. You can't necessarily change your style, but if you know it, you can be aware of it, you can laugh at it. It's just going to diffuse its power more. You're like, that's my pessimistic thought. That's how I work.
I actually find that a good workout, a very good, if I do a really hard, intense run or a sprint or a high intensity bicycling spin class or something, that if I'm anxious or I have a, like a sort of a pessimistic view of something, absolutely helps alleviate that.
Yes, absolutely. Your N of 1 has also been shown up in, studies of exercise and studies by Eli Putterman showing that exercise actually does reduce ruminative processes.